Hello and welcome to another video from me, Rough Swordsman Wargamer. This time I'm having a go and learning to play Panzer Grenadier from Avalanche Press. But I'm not using a scenario from this more recent pack with these lovely maps because they're mainly bocage, and that's a bit limiting, I think, for somebody showing how the game works. So instead we shall be using, and what I call them, the Marmite maps from Eastern Front. So let's have a little look at what counters we're going to be using. And here are the counters that we will be using in this scenario. Now, before I start, I just want to mention that a YouTuber called ID Jester has done many videos explaining the rules and how to play Panzer Grenadier, as well as a playthrough. So if you want an in-depth explanation of things like line of sight, you know, how to attack, what all the counters mean, how the leaders work, then pop along to ID Jester. If you go onto my homepage on YouTube, you'll see on the right hand side my recommended, or the subscriptions I like, and ID Jester is there, so check him out. So what have we got here for this scenario? Well, we've got the Germans and we've got the Russians. Now, in this sort of simple scenario which I've picked, we only have two types. We have units with black numbers and units with white numbers. Black numbers are units that fire bullets at soft, squidgy targets, and these are called direct fire. The first number is its strength, and the second number is the range. Up here you can see a 3, and that's its movement allowance. Next door we've got a slightly more powerful unit. This is a strength of 9 and a range of 5. It's a heavy machine gun. Because of that, it can't quite move as far. And for the Russians, similar sort of thing. Infantry units here, but they're a bit weaker. 4 strength and 2 range with a 3 movement allowance. And their heavy machine guns are not quite as powerful as the Germans. Strength 7. Range 4, movement 2. And these, with the white numbers, are things that lob stuff into the air, bombardment, indirect fire. So the first number again is its strength, and you can see it's got a much bigger range of 10, but can only move 1. Just as an aside, and for the sake of sort of completeness, there is a third type of fire that can occur, and this is shown here with these red numbers with a sort of yellowish background, and this is anti-tank fire. And anti-tank fire can target things like trucks and jeeps and AFVs, armoured fighting vehicles like tanks, but in this scenario there aren't any, but I thought I'd just mention them. And here are what is possibly the most important units in the game, the leaders. And here we've got a couple of examples of the Germans and the Russians. Now, leaders are important because they can activate units to advance towards the enemy. Units can activate on themselves, but they cannot move to any unit that can cause them harm. So leaders are important to keep the units moving forward. Now, in the middle here you can see there's a 9, and this is the morale of this leader. And if the leader needs to check morale, this is the number they need to throw or less. On the bottom left here you can see there's a little triangle. Sometimes it's got a number in, sometimes it hasn't. This is the combat modifier, and it can add that number to a unit strength and also combine 2 stacks that are adjacent. Number on the right is the morale modifier. If there are any combat units that need to rally or check morale, this number is added to their morale value and makes it easier for them to pass or to rally. So very important things. And as you can see, there are different ranks. I believe they go from colonel right the way down to corporal. And when you set up your units, and during the course of the game when you move them, a higher rank leader, if they're next door to a lower rank leader, can activate them as well, because a leader can activate itself, the stack and the 6 hexes around it. So if there's a subordinate next door, it can activate that, and that can activate its stack and the 6. And if there's another lower rank next door, you get the idea. A sort of chain reaction goes on. So for one action, you can have many activations. But hopefully we'll see all that happening in the scenario. Right, let's have a look at the setup. Right, the scenario I've decided to do from this huge scenario book from the Eastern Front game is Insecurities. Now I'll let you read that because it's got some names and places that I'm not going to murder by trying to pronounce them. But basically the Germans were attacking the Red Army, and the units concerned in this scenario were a little bit miffed that they weren't included, but they were an occupational unit. They didn't have much in the way of support weapons or heavy weapons, no artillery, that sort of thing. But they wanted to be part of the grand scheme, so they decided to attack, which could be very foolish. So that's what this is all about, because as it says here, these were only used against unarmed opponents. They were to keep the civilians in check. So there we go. Here's the 2 maps which we've got set up. It's 28 turns. Now that sounds a lot, and it is, so we'll see how we go with that. But they go quite quickly. There's not many units in this scenario. Starts at 0700 hours, nothing else. And up here we've got the units involved. So we've got 10 infantry for the Germans and 1 heavy machine gun. We've got a major, a captain, a couple of lieutenants. Their initiative is 2. We'll explain that in a minute if you don't know what it's all about. And the morale is 7/5. The units have a morale of 7 if they are good order, they haven't lost a step. But if they have lost a step by being turned over to a reduced side, their morale goes down to 5. Off-board artillery, no, they don't have any. For the Russians, 12 infantry, 3 heavy machine guns, and an 82mm piece of artillery. A colonel, captain, 3 lieutenants. Whoops. Their initiative is 1. Oops, sorry about that. And the morale is the same as the Germans, 7/5. But they do have 1 piece of off-board artillery as well, and we'll explain all that sort of thing as we go along. There are some special rules which says the initiative is lowered when steps are lost and all that sort of thing. And basically the victory conditions is who kills the most people. So that's the scenario. Now the thing about Panzer Grenadier is it's a platoon level game, and in this particular with these particular mechanics, it's not sort of rush in guns blazing. You're going to have to, it's a bit more subtle, you have to wear down the opposition by mucking about with their morale and making them disrupted and disorganised so they can't function as well, and move in and finish them off with an assault move. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, let's get set up. Right, we've sorted out the units, but you can see here there's tons of leaders, and you think, crikey, what do I want all them for? Well, with the Panzer Grenadier, you have to randomly pick each of your leaders, and for the Germans, we need a major. So what you do is you sort out all the major leaders, stick them in a cup, and choose one. Now you'll notice they are double-sided, one side being better than the other normally. And then after you've picked the amount of each rank, you then have to randomize which side you're going to use. Now in the book it says you flick it up or drop it. ID Jester suggests you throw a die, 1 to 3. It's this side, 4 to 6 the other side, or anything you wish really, but you've got to randomise that. So what I'll do is, rather than you watch me do that, I shall pick my leaders, flip them to see which side, and we'll get right back to you. Okay, I've picked my leaders and randomised which side by chucking them up in the air, and we've got quite a good major here with a morale of 10 and combat modifier of 2. That means he can add 2 to a unit he is stacked with, to their strength, and also 2 adjacent hexes for combined fire. He can add the stack values of those as well. Another good lieutenant there. Problem with the Russians is they're quite rubbish, unfortunately. Sort of lowish morale, and apart from the colonel, who's got a 1-1 here, the rest are all zeros. So we'll see how we get on. The other thing that I'm going to be using, I haven't seen it, but it's not in any of the other couple of Panzer Grenadier games I've got, is I'm going to use, in the front of the scenario book, they give you like the special rules and optional rules, one of which is the good old fog of war, which if you start playing this you will get to know. I won't be using it in this game because there's not a lot of units, but there is a random events chart in the back, and I shall be using that because that's quite fun. We can see that random events. So when we roll for initiative, if both sides roll the same, it's a tie without anything added on or taken away, then we roll on the random events chart, which should be fun, and that involves things like aeroplanes and that sort of thing. So if that happens, we'll see how that goes. The other thing is just to set up the movement thing. We've got our start here, and over there we've got the end. So you can see it's quite a long game. I've put the initiative of each side. There's the Germans, there's the Russians, and up here, just in case we need them, are some aircraft, Russians and Germans. And up here is our off-board artillery that the Russians can use once per turn. So, we'll see how that goes. Let's get it set up. Right, the units are set up. In the scenario, it said the Russians set up first anywhere on map 6, which I've done, and then the Germans can set up anywhere along the west edge of the map. Always north is to the top. So, what have I done? I've put most of the Russians in the woods, as you can see, with leaders, so I can activate this chain reaction thing. We've got the colonel here, who can activate this subordinate lieutenant. I think I said lieutenant before, oops. And then this lieutenant can activate that. The colonel can activate the captain and the lieutenant and this and so on. This is on its own. This is a couple of infantry platoons which we're going to dig in, I think. And up here, out of harm's way, we've got the mortar unit. And we'll see how that works in a moment. Along the west edge, as I say, we've got the Germans. Again, I've got the major here who's going to activate the captain, who's going to activate the lieutenant. And this major will activate this as well, because remember, it can activate all 6 hexes. This lieutenant here I've put with the heavy machine gun because it only has a movement allowance of 2, so if it gets left behind it can't move up, because a leader, as I said, has to activate it for it to move up towards units that can harm it. So that's that. What's next? We roll for initiative. Now what happens here, as you remember, the Germans have an initiative of 2 and the Russians of 1. We're going to throw 2 dice and add the respective initiatives on. So I've got yellow and white. White for the Russians, yellow for the Germans. Let's see what we get. Oh, straight away. That is a random event. So we'll just pop those there to remind us. Oops. And we'll throw 2 more dice and see what the random event is. Crikey. Excitement already. We've got a 9. And on the random event, Soviet units in any one hex may conduct a second action segment this turn. Right, so we've got to remember that. So we had 1 each for the Germans and the Russians. We add their initiative on. So, as I said, 2 and 1. So 1 plus 2 is 3. For the Germans, 1 plus 1 is 2. So we have a 3 and a 2. The Germans have 1. Now we subtract them. 3 take away 2 is 1. We then halve that. And it's not going to make a lot of difference this time because half of 1 is a half, and then we round up. So that is now 1. So the Germans, who have won the initiative, get 1 sort of action segment, if you like, to do something. So for the Germans' action segment, we're going to activate this major and the stack. So they can do something, but it also, as I say, all the imaginary hexes around it, it can activate this captain, who can activate this lieutenant, who can activate this stack. So all these stacks are activated and can move. Now what you have to do, if you're playing face to face, you have to tell the other person whether or not you're going to fire or you're going to move. Movement includes moving, of course, digging in, limbering and unlimbering, which we won't be doing in this one, or attempting to recover morale, weirdly enough. Fire includes direct fire, of course, bombardment, anti-tank fire, all that sort of nonsense, and assault. Even though you're moving into the hex to assault into the enemy hex, it's still classed as a fire. So we're going to move with these, and what I'll do is, so they're all activated except this one. I'm going to move them with their movement allowance, and rather than you watch me, I shall do it and come straight back. Okay, we've moved the Germans up using their movement allowance, bearing in mind that in Panzer Grenadier every unit is moved separately. This is because of things like opportunity fire and that sort of thing, because in Panzer Grenadier direct fire is directed at the hex, and it's not the units. It's directed at the hex, so it affects everything that's in that hex, whereas opportunity fire targets the individual unit that is moving. So that's why you have to move them one at a time. And when they're done, we pop, you can see that, one of these on, it says move fire. They're a bit hard to see. I've got some other ones for the Russians. And that just plops that on there. And that tells us they can't do anything else this turn. Okay, Russians. Okay, for the Russians, there's not a lot we can do. We're just sitting there waiting for the Germans to move up and attack us. We've only got a range of 2 for our infantry and 4 for our heavy machine gun. And even this has only got 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So they can't reach. In Panzer Grenadier, in clear, you can see 12 hexes. So they are spotted, but we can't do anything about them. So what I'll do is, I said I'm going to dig, these are going to dig in. Now when units dig in, it gives them benefits, gives them column modifiers, as you'll see, and first fire advantage when they're assaulted. Takes 2 activations, if you like, to do it. So normally it takes 2 turns, because remember they only get 1 activation per turn. So what I'll do is use the action segment and activate this stack here to start to dig in. Now normally what you do, it says in the rules, is that you as it takes 2 activations, you normally take the dug in counter, stick it on the bottom, and then the next time it has an activation, you can plop it on the top. But I've got these dinky, very small, I don't know if we can see them, very dinky little things saying it is digging in, and you can find these on the Panzer Grenadier Facebook page in the files section. There's ones for opportunity fire and all that. They're small, but if you're playing by yourself, they're fine. It's just a bit awkward when you're videoing. So that has had its activation, and that goes on the top telling me that it's done 1 activation of digging in. But if you remember from the random event, any Soviet hex can have a second activation segment or action segment. So what we'll do is we'll use it for this one, and so that will get now changed over to that. So it's now dug in. We'll get another one of those, and I'll use one of these actually so we can see the difference. These are much better, I think. These, there we go. That's it. Back to the Germans. Now all the Germans can do, these can't do anything more this turn because they've moved. We'll activate this and we'll move this one. So what have we got? I think they are, this is the one with 2 in it, isn't it? Yeah, we can only move 2. It's going to keep up. These can move 3, so this will be dragging behind, I suppose. So move them individually. 1 to come on, clears a 1 movement point. 1, 2, 3. 2 actually. 1, 2, and 1, 2. Plop. And one of those. There we go. Whoops. There we are. So actually the Germans can't do anything more this turn. It is now the Russians' turn to see if we can do anything. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We have this. This is the off-board artillery that the Soviets have every turn. Now again, I got these. You don't get these in the game. I made these myself. They're looking a bit rough, but they'll do for me. Off of actually Avalanche's Press's webpage. So this will tell us we've got an 8 strength bombardment. Now to bombard, they have to be spotted either by the thing that is bombarding it. For instance, this. But it can't because it's in the woods, it can't see anything. Or it can be directed by a leader that spots the target. So this leader here is spotting these, and it's radioing, I suppose, the off-board artillery to fire on a certain hex. Now, who are we going to fire at? Oh, the Major, I think. Yeah. It's not very strong, this bombardment. Oops. So what we'll do is we'll say, now a leader, even if it's moved and fired and has one of these counters on the top, can still spot for bombardment. So we're going to say, that was this one, wasn't it? The Major. Pop. So we now get the bombardment table. Here we are. Now we are on the 8. Let's just see if there's any column modifiers. They're all cumulative, and so we move up and down. Target hex. No, it's not in a town, it's not on a beach, it's not dug in. Target is not a mortar. It's not friendly fire, it's not a loaded truck. A lot of these won't apply, but I'm going through them just as it's the first time. Target hex, no, 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 no. Minefields, no. Is spotted by firing unit, no. It's off board. Target hex contains 3 combat units. No, it's only 2. Target is adjacent to firing unit. That is not on a model. That is not a mortar or a rocket. No. So it's as is. So we throw 2 dice, and we'll see what we get. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of gaps here. So in Panzer Grenadier, throwing low or high is the best thing. And as I said in the introduction, this isn't a guns blazing thing. This is wearing down the opposition. Sort of wearing down their will to fight. So they get disrupted, disorganised. Then you move in with an assault. So let's see what we get. 2 dice. Oh my goodness, 12. It's M1. Now M is a morale check, and 1 means they have to add 1 to that die roll, so it makes it a bit more awkward. So all these guys in here, that's done. Oops. Have to make a morale check. First one is the Major. He needs to throw 10 or less, but we are going to add 1 onto the dice rolls, so that makes it a little bit more awkward for him. 3 plus 1 is 4. No, he's fine. The Major's fine. Now, we remember they had a morale of 7 from the scenario, and 5 if they lose a step. So there's 7. So we're going to add 1 to the die roll. They need to throw 7 or less. 6 plus 1 is 7. They just do it. And this last platoon, oops, same thing again. 7 or less, adding 1 to the die roll. 3 plus 1 is 4. No, they all survive. There's a lot of misses in this game. But when you do get a hit, it's like, yes! So, that's that. That, I think, is now the Germans' turn, but the Germans cannot do anything. We come back to the Russians, and the only thing, these are going to stay here. They can't dig in because you can't dig in woods. Because if you look at the terrain effects chart, which is quite a thing, people are moaning because there's no pictures, because there's so much terrain now because of all the new games over the years. But if we look at woods, here we are. It says movement, movement, movement. Entrench, yes, but you can't dig in. So they can't do anything. This is out of range. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A couple of more spaces, then this can start firing. But that means they're getting nearer. So they're passing. They can't do anything. These can't do anything, so they're passing. You get 2 consecutive passes and the turn ends. So that's it. We move the turn marker up. And that's a turn in Panzer Grenadier. So let's see if we can quickly do another one. Now we sort of get in the gist of it. We throw 2 dice to see who gets the initiative. Take the higher one away from the lower one. Halve it, round it up. That's how many action segments the winning team gets. So white for the Russians, yellow for the Germans. Oh, crikey. 5 plus 2 is 7. 1 plus 1 is 2. So 7 take away 2 is 5. We halve that. That's 2.5. Round it up 3. Crikey, they get 3, mind you. See, with the problem with this, when you've got loads of units spread over a big map, you'll need lots of segments because this is like a sort of simple scenario. Once they've moved, that's it. But we can use our 2 action segments to sort of move this lot and then move this lot. So, what I forgot to do, of course, before I threw, was to remove all these, which I'll do now. And then they are quite thin, these counters, but I can see why they are, because there's quite a lot of stacking going on, because you've got move fires, you've got this, that and the other, you know, digging in and all that sort of thing. Just move that. Right, so what are we doing? Well, let's activate the old major again. Got to be careful now, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 here, this is going to be in range. I'll just pop that there to remind me. I think that was right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So the major's activating its stack, which activates this stack, and this one activates this one. So what I mean, how important it is. And if they're spread all over the board, you can't do as many sort of one-off activations. So movement of 3, we'll move this one first. 1, 2, 3. This this lieutenant says, oh, you do an opportunity fire. Oops, sorry about that, not the camera. And but it gave me the opportunity just to check something, and no, I cannot use opportunity fire with this mortar. Mortars are the only units, bombardment units, that can do opportunity fire, but they must be able to spot them themselves. I think if I read this right, unlimbered mortar units that possess a movement value greater than 0, well they've got 1, and can spot the target themselves are the only bombardment units that may conduct opportunity fire. There you go, so I can't do it. Right, so they're safe for the moment. So the rest of these are going to move up. Let's use these. They'll go together. They're the only, a leader can always go with a unit. 1, 2, 3. And again, 1, 2, 3. Weirdly, I'm not taking too much notice of it at the moment. Weirdly, roads in this game for foot units, which infantry are, of course, isn't your usual sort of half or whatever, or 1, it's 2/3. So maths, you know me and maths, crikey. Anyway, so I try and avoid it as much as possible. So they've moved. This one is going to move. Again, I don't think there's any way they can hit us. 1, 2, 3. I dare say when it's their Russians go, they're going to use their off-board artillery and their mortars to try and give us a good whack. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and the leader was with them. There we go. As I say, can't do that one because it wasn't in the chain reaction, as Diana Ross used to sing. Okay, Russians. This is spotting this. This is just a normal, it's not opportunity fire, so it's now this lieutenant is spotting. We're going to go after the major again, just in case we hit it, because if we can do something to the major, it messes about with their morale like nobody's business. So we'll see if that happens first. So we'll attack this with the off-board first. Now you might be saying, well, why can't you combine this bombardment with this bombardment? But you can't. Off-board is separate to on-board bombardment, I believe. So once again, we're going to look on the bombardment table, and it's an 8. Showed you it before. There is no, as far as I am aware, there are no column modifiers. So let's see what they get. 6. 6, as you can see, is a miss. Very frustrating. So that's done. That is their activation. Back to the Germans. Germans, all they've got is this one here, so we're going to move this one. And again, it can only move 2. Whoops. This, so I'm only going to move 1, 2. It is dragging behind, but I do not want it to get left. So we can't move it forward. Once it's in a position, sort of up here, hopefully, we can start using it to fire. It's not moving. It's called combat movement, I think, where you're moving towards the enemy that can hurt you. But if they're staying there, they can just fire the machine guns. Right, that's it. Back to the Russians. All the Russians can do, really, they're just waiting there, is to unleash their mortars. Again, I think on the major, this one is spotting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Remember, there's 12 in the clear. They can see 12. Can't see him, by the way, because they're in the town now. Line of sight is very important in this. But again, this is a nice clear map just to show you what's going on, hopefully. So this is going to fire on the major again. We're on the 8 table. Not very powerful, but you never know. Lucky we were last time. 9. And 9 on the 8. Again, it's a miss. Wanted a 10. As I say, highs and lows in this game. And that is it. Pop. Back to the Germans, who can't do anything. Russians are not doing anything. That is the end of that turn. You can see how quickly it's going. Not a lot going on, I'm afraid. But we're moving up. They're girding their loins, ready for the onslaught. So we'll see what happens. Right, I think I've gone on long enough. We'll end this one here, and we'll continue with the next turn when we next see you. So, hope you've enjoyed it. Hope I'm playing it right. I can see why people like this game, and I can also see why people can't get on with it. There's not a lot of rushing forward, guns are blazing at the moment. As I say, wearing down each side's morale, getting them disrupted, disorganised is the name of the game here. So they're weak and ready to be assaulted and eliminated. Right, so if you have enjoyed it, please subscribe, like the video, push the bell, all that sort of thing, leave a comment, and thank you as always to my lovely subscribers. Thank you so much. So, until the next time, this has been part 1 of a playthrough of Panzer Grenadier from Avalanche Press. So until next time, you take care and goodbye.